James Andrews sat at his desk, rubbing his eyes as he struggled to focus on the glowing screen in front of him. Another Tuesday morning, another grueling round of data analysis for the low-level tech firm he'd been stuck at for the last 12 years. It wasn't glamorous. There were no neon lights, no excitement, no life-changing opportunities. Just numbers, zeros, ones, and an occasional corporate memo about how the future of space exploration was just around the corner. Jim didn't care. He was 52, disillusioned, and far too tired to buy into anyone's shiny new promises. He grabbed his coffee mug, took a sip, grimaced at the taste. He was pretty sure it was some combination of burnt cardboard and last week's regret, and opened his email. As usual, most of it was spam, reminders about reports he was supposed to file, and offers for cutting-edge financial plans from companies that wouldn't even let him open an account without proving his net worth was at least 6 figures. But then there it was. Subject: Congratulations, you've been selected from Intergalactic Technology Exchange. Jim squinted at the screen. He'd heard rumors of some kind of alien technology breakthrough circulating in the news, but the government had always been vague, cryptic, and very, very good at pretending they didn't know anything. He opened the email with the kind of detached curiosity that only comes from having been jaded by too many years of corporate BS. You've been selected to participate in the greatest leap forward in human history, the Intergalactic Technology Exchange. Our advanced alien civilization has chosen you to be among the first human beings to access cutting-edge alien technologies designed to accelerate Earth's development and usher in a new age of prosperity, but there's one small catch. To unlock these incredible advancements, think faster than light travel, cures for every disease, quantum-level computing, etc., you must first meet a requirement. It's a simple procedure, one that our species has practiced for millennia. It's called the Stallion Ritual. To put it simply, you, along with a select group of elite individuals, will serve as genetic vessels for the intergalactic community. Through this ritual, your genetic material will be enhanced, ensuring the survival and prosperity of humanity for centuries to come. The process is entirely voluntary, but we assure you, the rewards are beyond imagining. Sincerely, the Intergalactic Technology Exchange Council. Jim stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. He took another sip of the awful coffee, trying to make sense of the email. Genetic vessels? Stallion ritual? The first thought that crossed his mind was that someone was playing a prank. Maybe his buddy, Doug, had hacked into the company's server again and was messing with him. He started typing an angry reply but hesitated. It was way too elaborate to be Doug. Plus, the email was too formal. Too official. Then, Jim remembered something: the alien signal. He'd heard rumors of a strange transmission picked up from deep space months ago, but it had been dismissed as an anomaly. It had been a pretty big deal for a few days before everyone moved on to the next viral scandal. But now? It seemed too coincidental. Genetic vessels. That's when it hit him. They were asking men to become part of some kind of intergalactic breeding program. The message was clear: no one would be getting free technology without a catch. Jim snorted. Well, damn, he muttered, leaning back in his chair. Guess I finally made it big. The next few days were a blur of media frenzy. Governments, tech companies, and influential billionaires scrambled to jump on the bandwagon. World leaders promised that humanity's future was at stake, a small price to pay for the kind of tech that could end poverty, eliminate disease, and send people to the stars. Jim watched it all unfold from the comfort of his disillusioned office chair, taking it all in with a sense of dark amusement. He'd heard people talk about selling out, but now, humanity had the chance to literally sell its genetic material to aliens for technological favors. His inbox was flooded with new updates from the Intergalactic Technology Exchange, videos of astronauts in pristine spacesuits smiling while shaking hands with emotionless aliens, well-dressed ambassadors touting the promises of immortality, celebrity endorsements from people Jim didn't care about. The excitement was palpable. But for Jim, the whole thing felt off. He watched as people who had no idea what they were getting into began lining up for the Stallion program. The government had made it sound like an honor to be selected. It felt more like a grotesque auction. Still, it was hard to resist the siren call of the offer. Faster than light travel. A cure for cancer. Virtual immortality. Could he really say no to something that big? On the day Jim signed the contract, it felt like the world was holding its breath. The media was in a frenzy. At the tech summit, where the world's most influential CEOs, scientists, and politicians gathered to officially accept the alien terms, Jim reluctantly walked up to the podium, his heart racing with a cocktail of disbelief, anger, and curiosity. He could see the eager faces in the crowd, rich men and women in tailored suits, their eyes wide with excitement. They'd all come for one thing: power. If these aliens could deliver what they promised, they'd be the rulers of the new world. And maybe, just maybe, they'd get to go beyond Earth. Jim's hands shook slightly as he signed the contract, his fingers moving mechanically across the paper. His signature was a reluctant one, drawn out of fear, greed, and the pressure of the situation. As soon as he finished, Eleanor Marks, the CEO of his company, clapped him on the back and handed him a glass of champagne. "Congrats, Jim," she said with a wink. "You've just signed up for history." Jim didn't know what to say. He had no words. He'd just sold himself, and maybe humanity, for some shiny technology. He was supposed to be happy, to feel proud, but all he felt was a gnawing sense of regret. It wasn't until later that night, lying in his bed staring at the ceiling, that the weight of what he had done really settled in. His mind raced. What did the stallion ritual mean? What was he getting himself into? And why, for the love of God, was he the one chosen for this absurd experiment? The next morning, Jim found himself in a high-tech, sterile facility with hundreds of other men. The air was crisp and metallic, the walls smooth and featureless. He stood in line with the others, trying to ignore the nagging sense of dread that gnawed at him. The alien technology, whatever it was all around them, but there was no sign of the alien beings themselves. Instead, they had representatives, cold, efficient beings who spoke in monotones, their faces emotionless. Jim was told to undress, and then they handed him a white suit that felt both too tight and too loose at the same time. "Welcome," a voice boomed from a speaker above them. "You have all been chosen because of your genetic potential. You will play an important role in the next chapter of humanity's evolution. Please relax and let the procedure begin." A technician came over, his face impassive, and attached electrodes to Jim's chest. "Don't worry," the technician said, not looking at Jim. "The ritual is simple. We will enhance your genetic code. You will not remember most of it, but the results will be clear." Jim couldn't help himself. He cracked a grin. "Well, I guess it's a good thing I'm not worried about remembering," he said with a dry laugh. The technician didn't even blink. At that moment, Jim felt a strange sensation in his mind. The idea of genetic enhancement started to feel less like an exciting opportunity and more like an overwhelming invasion. And it wasn't just the body modifications that freaked him out, it was the subtle feeling that he was no longer in control of his own destiny. He tried to fight the panic rising in his chest, but it was useless. He was already too far gone. Jim tried to shake off the growing unease gnawing at him, but the tension in his chest only deepened. The technician, who might as well have been a robot, moved methodically, attaching more wires and sensors. Jim's thoughts raced, but his body felt detached, almost as if it were someone else's. The sterile room, the unblinking faces of the other volunteers, the absence of any real explanation, none of this made sense. There was no excitement, no sense of honor. It was just a clinical operation, stripped of humanity. When he first signed the agreement, it had seemed like a ridiculous opportunity, a joke even. He would take part in this bizarre ritual, get some quick alien tech, and maybe, just maybe, live a life of comfort and luxury. After all, who could pass up the chance to be part of the greatest leap in human history? Now, though, Jim wasn't so sure. There was something inherently off about this. Why would an alien civilization, so advanced that they could cure disease, eliminate hunger, and break the laws of physics, care about human genetics? What was the catch? And why was he among the chosen few? He wasn't special. He wasn't an Olympian or a genius. Hell, he barely made it out of bed most days. But here he was, hooked up to machines, ready to have his very genetic makeup altered by beings from another world. "You're ready," the technician said, his voice flat and devoid of any real human warmth. Jim could barely make out the technician's face behind the mask, but he swore there was something almost smug about the way he said it. As if this moment had been long anticipated, and Jim was just another cog in a well-oiled machine. The technician pushed a button on the wall, and the room grew dimmer, the overhead lights flickering before adjusting to a cool blue hue. It wasn't quite dark, but the change was enough to make Jim feel like he was stepping into a different world, one where he no longer had control, no longer had any say in his own future. He opened his mouth to ask another question, but the words caught in his throat. The air seemed thicker now, as though it was closing in on him. The walls, the sterile whiteness of it all, began to feel like a cage. His heart started pounding. He didn't want to do this. Not anymore. But then, as if sensing his hesitation, a voice, an unfamiliar, calm voice, spoke from the speakers above them. "Humanity is at a crossroads. We offer you this gift for the good of your species. The ritual is essential for your survival. There is no alternative. You must embrace it." The voice wasn't threatening. In fact, it was soothing. But it didn't sound like a reassurance. It sounded like an ultimatum, one that Jim couldn't escape. He thought back to the message he'd received, the seductive offer of immortality and power. How could he have been so naive? This wasn't about elevating humanity, it was about using humanity. He wasn't just a volunteer in some noble program, he was a commodity, a pawn in a much larger game. The machine whirred to life, and a sharp prickling sensation ran down his spine. It wasn't painful, but it was uncomfortable, like the very fabric of his body was being rearranged. His muscles tensed involuntarily, his arms twitching. His eyes darted around the room, seeking some kind of reassurance, some indication that he was in control, that this was somehow normal, but nothing came. It was just the cold precision of the process. For the first time, Jim felt truly afraid. Hours later, Jim was alone in a small, stark room, sitting on a bed that seemed too clean to be real. The procedure was over. At least, that's what they told him. His body felt strange, he couldn't explain it. He wasn't sure if it was the lingering effects of the ritual or something deeper. He felt different. Not in the sense of having become physically stronger or smarter, but as if a part of him was slipping away. There was no longer a clear line between who he was and who he was meant to become. A door opened, and a figure stepped in, a woman, one of the few who'd volunteered for the program. He recognized her from the summit. Lana, a biologist turned genetic researcher who had seemed so eager to take part in the ritual. But her expression was anything but eager now. "You feeling okay?" she asked, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Jim managed a grunt, though he wasn't sure how to answer. He didn't feel okay. He didn't feel anything like the man who had walked into this facility days ago. "Do you know what they've done to us?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Her eyes were wide, filled with an anxious curiosity, but there was something else too, something that Jim couldn't quite place. It was as if she'd already made peace with something he wasn't ready to accept. "I don't know," Jim said, rubbing his face with both hands. "I don't know what's real anymore." Lana nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I thought it was just genetic enhancement. You know, physical upgrades, maybe a little intelligence boost. But it's not that. It's control. The aliens, they're using us, Jim. They've been using us for generations." "What do you mean?" Jim asked, his voice hoarse. He felt a growing pit in his stomach. "Not just humans. They've been experimenting on other species for centuries. It's like we're a resource, a kind of genetic fuel for their evolution. We're part of something much larger than we understand, something that's been in the works long before we even knew about them." Jim stood up, his knees unsteady. He felt as though the floor beneath him was shifting. "So, what are we? Lab rats?" Lana didn't answer immediately, but when she did, her voice was steady. "Worse. We're the experiment, Jim. The aliens don't just want to improve us, they want to manipulate us, to fold us into their plans. They want to control the future of humanity. They want to make us a tool in their cosmic design." Jim felt his blood run cold. "But I thought," "I know," she interrupted. "They sold us the dream. They said we'd become part of an intergalactic network, a civilization that spanned galaxies. That humanity would reach the stars, that we'd have eternal life. It's all a lie. The truth is, we're becoming part of something bigger. And that something doesn't care about us." Jim stumbled back, his mind racing. This was too much to process. Too much to take in. He had signed up for this. He had volunteered for this. He wasn't supposed to be part of a larger agenda, he was supposed to benefit from it. "Is there any way to stop it?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Is there any way to reverse it?" Lana's eyes darkened. "I don't know. But I'm trying. We need to act quickly. If the aliens complete their plan, if we allow them to integrate us fully into their systems, we'll be nothing more than biological machines, tools for their higher purpose. I don't think anyone's coming to save us." Jim felt a wave of panic crash over him. The realization hit him like a fist to the chest. He wasn't in control anymore. He had been tricked. This wasn't a chance for advancement, it was a trap, but he had to try. He had to fight back. Days turned into weeks, and Jim's life took on a surreal quality. Every day felt like walking through a fog, unsure of what was real and what had been altered. He joined Lana and a small group of others who had begun to see the truth. Together, they worked in secret, learning as much as they could about the alien technology. It wasn't easy. The alien systems were vast, and the deeper they dug, the more they realized that their enemies were always one step ahead. One day, they managed to crack part of the alien code, an encryption buried deep in the genetic enhancements they'd received. Jim's heart raced as he looked at the screen. The key was right there, and with it, they might just have a chance to undo everything, but it wasn't enough to simply break the encryption. They had to act fast. And they had to be willing to risk everything. Jim stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was it. The moment that would define the future of humanity. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. If he hit the wrong key, it could be the end of them all. Are you ready? Lana asked from behind him, her voice tight with tension. Jim nodded, his mind made up. Let's do it. The days that followed were a blur of action and confusion. They managed to infiltrate the alien systems, sabotage the rituals, and broadcast a message to the world. It wasn't a perfect solution, and they didn't have all the answers, but they had one thing, hope, and sometimes, that was enough. Jim walked away from the facility, knowing that the battle wasn't over. There was still so much to do, so much to undo. But for the first time in months, he felt like he had reclaimed a small piece of himself. The aliens would learn. The humans were not so easily controlled. And just like that, the world began to change.